So I decided to take out a personal loan, which had a crazy high interest rate. And everyone in my life was like, don't do it. That's so dumb. Why would you do that? Why would you ever take out a personal loan to buy some stock? But I did that. And thank God that I did, because honestly, the SpaceX stock has been one of my best investments.
Welcome to Money Musings, a podcast that breaks down money, investing, and wealth with zero BS and unapologetic irreverence. I'm your host and money co-conspirator, Stephanie Zenos. Let's get into it.
Okay, I do not know where the idea for this episode came from, but the other day I started thinking about all the crazy shit that I did to make money over the years, and I gotta tell you, I'm a hustler. I earned that title. I might be a side hustler, not a gangster hustler, but I'm just saying I'm pretty proud of this list, and I can't wait to share it with you. I know this is sort of random, but just to set the scene, you have to imagine I was a kid who grew up really poor and in a house that had financial abuse where basically my mom couldn't leave, and physical abuse. And I decided I was going to be different. I was going to be rich. I ended up way too independent, but we'll set that aside for another time to talk about that aspect. And instead, let's just talk about all the crazy things that I did to build wealth. I was so motivated and really started at 14, which is kind of cool. So my very first way that I made money was working at the strawberry fields. I was paid under the table $5 an hour. I worked Saturdays and Sundays for 8 hours each, and I made tips. So a couple of different things that I did there. One, I actually sold strawberries like at the stand. That didn't make nearly as much money, although I also made strawberry shortcake and I would normally get more tips for that. But also I actually worked in the strawberry fields for the U-pick. So when, people would be like, oh, we want to pick our own strawberries, right? They come, they get a little bag, and then I essentially help them like wrap everything up and take it out. And I remember wearing my bikini like a little goose, silly little goose, wearing my bikini because I was like, oh, I'm going to get more tips if I have a bikini on. So I made bank. If you think about it, I was 14, right? And just the money I was making under the table was $100 a weekend, basically. And then plus tips, I had so much money just sitting around my room. It was absurd. So that was my very first job. And I had that job with a friend, which was really fun. Like we would basically work together and we would do stupid things like save up all the whipped cream cans and then inhale all of that gas and then giggle and roll around on the floor. So clearly A+ employee, right? I was 14 years old, so I didn't know what I was doing. I also worked at Wetzel's Pretzels. I think I was like 15 by the time I worked at Wetzel's Pretzels. And that was a hoot because honestly, I loved the pretzels and I was eating them all day long. But again, another like silly under the table job where I learned that a lot of the employees around me were not necessarily the most honest people. Oh my goodness, what a foray into the world for me, just to see how other people operate in jobs like that. Next, Cold Stone Creamery. So Cold Stone, I had to sing for tips. If you remember that, like we actually had to sing when you tipped us. I heard recently that that is no longer the case. And thank God, because those stupid songs that we had to sing were horrible. And let me tell you something, Cold Stone. Here's a pro tip to management executives at Cold Stone. Do not hire stoners to work at Cold Stone, okay? Because my fellow employees were legitimately hotboxing the walk-in freezer and eating all of the candy, okay? So just saying, pro tip, maybe be careful who you hire there. Then I started getting a little more savvy because Cold Stone was also a very, minimum wage job. And I started trying to think about how I could make more money. My strawberry fields job was really the best money I made as a teenager. But the next thing I tried was tutoring children. Tutoring children can actually be very, very lucrative, especially if you can get to an area of LA or a major city where people have money. So I started tutoring rich kids in math and science. And I would drive, up to the Palisades, or I would go to Hancock Park to tutor rich families. And at that point, I was charging like $25 to $30 an hour. And this is when Craigslist was really like my jam. I would get on Craigslist and I would advertise as a tutor. I don't know how I got the nerve to do that because now that sounds so scary to me. Just like, yeah, I'll come to your house and tutor your kids and don't know anything about you. And I met you on Craigslist. Like, yikes. But That's what I was doing. And that's kind of like when I started at UCLA. And so I was a physics student. So I could officially say, hey, I'm studying physics. I'll teach your kids math and science. That was very, very lucrative. And I got to drive all over LA and like meet some kind of interesting people. So that was kind of a fun one. Next up, I went back to retail. So your girl has had a lot of retail and food experience. So I worked at Victoria's Secret in Westwood by UCLA. And I basically measured titties for money. Like, that's what I like to tell people. So I know you're jealous, but I was something that they called a bra specialist. And so my job was to wear a little tape measure around my neck, walk around the store and be like, hi, do you want to get fitted for bras? And then I would measure your boobs. And then I would be like, okay, here at 32C. And then I would help you pick out bras. And actually, I think that job was pretty fun. I think lingerie is cool. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun at that job. What a funny way to make money is just like walking around measuring boobs. Now I can basically look at a pair of boobs and tell you what size they are. So, if that skill isn't lucrative, I don't know what is. Okay, next up came doggy daycare. So I worked at a doggy daycare in LA. And I gotta tell you, it was cage-free boarding. You were required to know every single dog by name, so that if they misbehaved, you would scream their name at the top of your lungs in order to get them to stop. So imagine a giant room with concrete floors and like 50 dogs all just running around and knowing every dog by name. And you're supposed to know their owners by name. And then upstairs was like the cozy small dog or old dog, quiet dog area. And I would actually spend the night there. So I would get paid to sleep over with people's pets who needed overnight boarding. Never mind that a lot of the overnight boarding were actually strippers' dogs. So I would get like these cute, fluffy little Bichons and I would snuggle them at night while their owners were out making good money, better money than I was making for sure. But that was one of the jobs that I had. And I learned a lot about dogs and dog training. So now I'll be like walking around with my friends' dogs. And every once in a while, they'll have one that's like not doing so hot, being a little rude. And I can just like grab a hold of it and usually have pretty good dog intuition. So, that still comes in handy to this day. Okay, here is a little bit more interesting one. So I donated my eggs. If I can remember, I donated them at least 3 times while I was in college. And they were all to just incredible families. So I was a little bit of a weirdo, right? I was hyper independent. I was like, I'm never going to fall in love. I'm going to be rich. I don't believe in love and marriage. I'm never going to have kids. So black and white thinking at that point in my life. But turns out I was mostly right. I still have no children that I have actually birthed myself. However, I know for a fact that I have at least 3 biological children from egg donation. The egg donation process is actually amazing. I think it's so cool. So I knew I wanted to pass on my genes, do my biological due diligence, and not have to have my own babies. So the first family that I donated my eggs to, I remember that the father was a professional athlete and the mother was a blonde scientist. So they wanted me because I guess I was more similar to the mom. The next family, they were Greek and the woman was pretty fair. And so they wanted someone who was fair and Greek also. And so at that point, my eggs were commanding a lot of money. Also being, of course, like a physics major at UCLA doesn't hurt. And I was 19 and very fresh. My eggs were so fresh then, So I made a lot of money. I think my first cycle was only $12,000, but it went up from there. And so I made a good amount of money donating my eggs. And they would send me little gifts when the kids were born. And actually, I thought it was really cool at the time. So I know I have at least 3 children likely in the Los Angeles area that are not mine, just have my biological data. So anyway, I actually really love that I did that. I think it's really cool. And I have yet to have any biological children or birth any of my own. So I do feel like I did my due diligence there. Around this time, I also got into credit card churning. So I got my first credit card when I went to UCLA. And I was like, okay, I know I need to build credit if I want to be able to rent apartments or buy a car, right? I was hip to that. So I started opening all of these credit cards and churning them for all of the points and rewards and things. So I would open them all on one day online if I could, and then close them all like exactly a year later so I wouldn't have to pay the fee again, but I could use all of the benefits. And to my knowledge, this really didn't hurt my credit. It somehow built my credit, and I would I'd put things on the card and pay it off in full every month. But yeah, credit card churning definitely helped me with like getting a bunch of free stuff and building my credit, which of course helped contribute to my wealth. Also, while I was in college, I decided to rent a house and then try to rent out various rooms inside of it, basically making my rent cheaper and also my living conditions better. I've done this a couple times in life, and I don't know if it's worth it. It can be a pain in the butt, especially like if you can't find a roommate. Later on, when I was working at SpaceX and I did this, I actually struggled to find a roommate, and that kind of screwed me over. So, house hacking, as we like to call it, can be a really great way to make money, and sometimes it's also a pain. Then I got jobs after college. First was at JPL. I started investing in my 401k like right away. I was really excited to be investing. I also opened an account with an advisor and started investing that way. Like I literally opened my Roth IRA with $50. That is a true story. And yeah, started investing that way. Then I heard about SpaceX and I was like, oh my God, I have to work at SpaceX. And how I heard about SpaceX was at a party. And I just was like, wow, I got to see this place with my own eyes. And the moment I did, I was obsessed. I couldn't not work there. I knew I had to work there. And they told me like, oh my gosh, we're going public any day now. You got to get in now while you can. And so I was so excited. I was like, get me in here. I have to move fast. Never mind that Elon just said we might go public next year in 2026. So, we've been waiting. What is that now? 16 years. But yeah, right around the corner. So I started working at SpaceX, and the first year, I had to wait 1 year until I could get any SpaceX stock. That's called a cliff, right? So normally there's like a 4 or 5 year vesting period. So you get all your stock, but you have to wait at least 1 year for the 1 year cliff. And that's when you get your first chunk. But I didn't have like a ton of cash at that point. My cash was all invested. I was investing everything. So I actually didn't have savings back then. And I would have been like 25, 26, right? So all of my money was going into my Roth IRA or investment accounts. And when the time came to buy my stock, I didn't have the cash. So I decided to take out a personal loan, which had a crazy high interest rate. And everyone in my life was like, don't do it. That's so dumb. Why would you do that? Why would you ever take out a personal loan to buy some stock? And you don't even know if the stock's going to like turn into anything. But I did that. I ended up taking out a personal loan, and thank God that I did, because honestly, the SpaceX stock has been one of my best investments. Not only did I give them 8 years of my life to work there, but also earned that stock, paid for that stock, and held on to at least as much as I could, except I did make one giant mistake, which we'll talk about later, but not in this episode. We'll save that for another time. Also, while I was at SpaceX, I got really into online dating. I was one of those like original OkCupid people. Like I loved online dating. I would spend tons of time on my profile, answer like hundreds of questions so that I could get like perfectly matched, like 99% match with so-and-so on OkCupid. I actually started helping SpaceXers with their online dating profiles. So I helped one person, and then that person like told someone, I helped someone else. I would make like these really clever usernames, which was all part of the fun with the old school online dating. Now it's just like swipe, 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 swipe. But it used to be like so much effort, and you could actually meet someone that you really had a lot in common with because there was so much information about that person on the profile. I remember getting so excited when I would read these profiles and like you actually get to know someone. Regardless, I started doing this for money. So I would write these profiles and people would pay me, or they'd pay me to help choose the photos. I would actually interview people and write the profiles and get paid like a couple $1,000. So I did that for one of my older friends and got him some dates. I started getting paid for the number of dates I would set people up on. It was so fun. And let me tell you, I am still interested in being a matchmaker. Maybe like my 4th career will be a matchmaker. I am always listening for single people, and I'm like, oh, I want to set these people up. There's some in my neighborhood now. I have some friends that are single. I'm like, So yeah, maybe my 4th career will be a matchmaker. And I hope that could be lucrative. I really don't know. Okay, then I took a sabbatical. I decided to leave SpaceX and go to Greece. And the thought was, I don't know my dad that well. I met him when I was 20. I wanted to build a house with him as a project. He basically said, Steph, like, if you can't afford to buy a house in the US, which I could not at the time, you can come to Greece, we'll build a house together. It'll be a great project, and then it'll be a good investment for you. So I was like, interesting. Okay. So then I moved to Greece, took the sabbatical from SpaceX, but I wasn't sure if I was ever coming back. And I lived on this island and like bought this piece of land with my dad and like got to know him that way and got involved in the family business, which was really cool. It was an amazing opportunity. I'm so glad I did it. And then I panicked and moved back to the US. But while I was there, I had so much time on my hands. If you can imagine the life working at SpaceX just being so busy and then moving to an island in Greece and having nothing to do, like crickets, like truly, I was going insane. But one very cool thing came out of this time. 2, 3 very cool things came out of this time. The house, obviously. The experience of getting to know my dad and my family, obviously. But also, this was the time when I taught myself how to invest in individual companies. I developed a whole methodology. So this would have been in, 2015. So about 11 years ago. So 11 years ago, I shifted my entire investing methodology from investing in index funds to investing in individual companies and other things like that. So I spent this time on the island kind of developing my methodology, making some of my first investments. One of my first bigger investments, which was big for me at the time, was a $10,000 investment in Mercado Libre, which has since 25x or something like that. I think it's down a little bit right now, actually, but as much as 25x, which for me is a huge amount of money. And imagine that 10K was in my Roth IRA. So that $250,000 that it's made, guess what? Tax-free, baby. And that's like the only tax-free thing I've got. So that was really cool. I really got to spend a lot of time kind of developing my interests, and I started researching companies in fields that I was interested in, right? And I was like, okay, Amazon's doing great. How can I find something like Amazon? And then Mercado Libre was kind of like the Amazon and PayPal of Latin America. And I was like, okay, let's try that. Then I came back and worked a little bit longer at SpaceX. And as my side hustle, I started pet sitting on Rover. I love animals. I'm obsessed with animals. I had always wanted a dog, but working at SpaceX, I just didn't have the time for a dog. So I would basically have other people's dogs stay the night on the weekends and get paid like an absurd amount, a couple $100 for watching like a cute little Frenchie. And wow, tell me a better job. I mean, truly, what a side hustle. And then finally, when I retired from SpaceX, the very first thing I did was get a certification to be a bar instructor. So I was always really interested in health, fitness. I always wanted to be a bar instructor or like an instructor of sorts. I love teaching, surprise. And so as a bar instructor, you actually would do the entire class and talk through the whole class. So give every single instruction and also every single move to the actual music. Everything was timed to the music. Every single thing. So you had to be like musically inclined, fun. You had to be able to talk and exercise at the same time. Okay, I didn't make a ton of money doing this, shocker, but I did have an amazing opportunity to build community in Seattle when I was living there. And it was really incredible. I do not regret anything about being a bar instructor. That was one of my favorite side hustles that I've had, other than probably the dogs. I mean, dogs are an amazing side hustle. And snuggling pets, you can actually get paid for that. What are you talking about? All right, that's my list. That's all I got for you today. I did just want to share that just to kind of like give you a glimpse into my life and the things that I've done in order to make money. And I feel like my personality is probably pretty well highlighted in that list as well. So hope you enjoyed.
Thanks for allowing me to be part of your money journey. If you heard something that made you think in a new way or expanded your views about money today, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave me a cute little note in the form of a review. See you next time. As always, a quick but important reminder that everything I share here is solely for the purpose of your entertainment, education, and inspiration. Nothing in this podcast should be taken as personal financial, legal, or investment advice. Everyone's financial situation is wildly different, and that's why it's so important that you do your own research and decide what's right for you.